All of us have unpleasant memories from our past that we find ourselves reliving. On today's show, Tom Garcia will be talking about the decision we must make to dispel those memories so we can get on with our lives. After our conversation, Grounds for Thought will explore survival guilt. So stay tuned. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. 3 weeks ago, Dan Jones gave a lesson in bringing active calm into our lives through Tai Chi right on this show. As he moved in his stance, he said, allowing instead of trying, allowing the mind to quiet, allowing the body to relax, breathing through our nose, maintaining your Tai Chi stance. Now, after the show, I was talking with him and asked him if allowing is the same as letting go. His response was absolute. Letting go of control, letting the body do its thing, allowed the body to do what was necessary to prepare and maintain what he calls active calm. Today, I want to take that concept of active calm to another place. When Dan teaches active calm, it is initiated from the physical. He described it as allowing the body to do what you are asking it to do. Allowing. But active calm is more than the physical, and Dan would agree. Today, the conversation will be about active calm that is initiated from the psyche, or, as I prefer to think about it, from the spirit. In business, spirit is thought of as the intangible energy, purpose, or passion that motivates the business and its employees. Today, I want to talk about a particular disruption to the spirit that can block the energy, stymie the purpose, or shut down the passion of individuals. Imagine if you knew how to remove that block and release all the amazing power that would come from people who can tap into their full sense of purpose, their passion, their energy. It would be like helping someone who is ill to heal themselves so they can return to their lives in full. I feel as though I'm getting a bit on the edge, and yet it is not the edge. It is what psychology would call depth. My guest today is Dr. Tom Garcia. We met virtually several years ago and have never met in person, but we have communicated via emails through his poetry and, of course, our conversations here on Unlocked. Tom is authentic, honest, and powerful, and very compassionate. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Madelyn.
Let me tell my audience a bit more about you.
All right.
Dr. Tom Garcia has been in the healing arts for well over 30 years. Today, he is a shaman and wisdom keeper. He is also a coach, writer, teacher, mentor, and guide. His work focuses on deep healing in body and mind. One of the things I love about Tom is that he knows what he knows and can convey that to you in clear English. So, Tom, welcome back to Unlocked.
Oh, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, Madelyn.
The pleasure's all mine.
Oh.
Well, let's get right into it, because I think it's so curious as to why you got into the kind of business that you are doing now. So I want you to share that with the audience.
Okay, that'll help people to understand a little bit. It's like context, like, where we all come from something, I was a chiropractor for 30 years, but during that time, halfway through my career, a dear friend of mine came to stay with us in our home, and he spent the last 18 months of his life with us. This is my story. Like, we all have a story of a crucible moment, a turning point. And the experience of loving this man, taking care of him, my wife and I, our 4 kids, and watching him decline and withdraw
Mm.
from life. And at that time when he was most withdrawn and most terrified, it set something off in me. And we live on many acres of wooded property, and I just started going to the woods and making fire and sitting quietly in the early morning hours or staying out at night, oftentimes all night. And it awakened something in me that has stayed with me all these years. And one of the key pieces of this work that I do today is staying really close to the bone, close to the fire, close to the earth. And now I have people who come to my fire to work with me. If You may not have mentioned this before, but I'll say it now. I work with plant medicine, fire ceremony, and a deep dialogue, help people to open up and awaken to who they truly are. And that's really the essence of the work, is helping people to remember who they are so they can live their life as fully expressed as they're capable of. So,
Every time I hear you describe that, I wish I lived closer by.
yeah,
But we're almost half a continent away, so that's a little
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
Well, what you said kind of touched on what I was doing this week as I prepared for this. I was looking at suicide rates reported from the CDC, and I
Mhm.
was really struck by the growth in suicide rate over the last 22 years that they report. The rate is expressed in the number of suicides per 100,000 in population, so that you understand what the numbers mean. So
Mhm.
from 2000 to 2022, it went from 10.4 to 14.2. Now that's a remarkable increase.
Yeah,
And the rates of men went from 17.7 to 22.9,
mhm.
significantly higher than the average.
Yeah,
And when I looked at which states had higher than average, it was the western states, from Idaho to Oklahoma, from Nevada to North Dakota, plus Alaska. When I look at the statistics of illness and depression and suicide, I feel we are people who are carrying memories that might be better set aside. What are your thoughts about why forgiveness is so needed today?
so great question. And one of the things that occurs to me as you were citing those statistics is there's a book that came out recently called The Anxious Generation, and it tracks the the increase in depression, anxiety, suicide amongst people, young people in particular, over the last 25 years, from about, well, even less than that. But um, with the advent of the cell phone and social media, the the distress, essentially, the distress that it's caused among young people and adults. There's a depth of despair that's in the field, that's in our culture, and it's exacerbated by what we see on social media. It's like the illusion brought to the fore of our minds.
Mm.
So it's really derailed us in many ways. The topic of forgiveness it's a deep well. If you consider what forgiveness, one way of holding forgiveness, it's more than just an act. It's really a state of being. It's a way of moving through the world. It's a functional way of being where forgiving the little things in the most elemental way, in the most minute way, every day, every single day, forgiving myself, forgiving myself, forgiving you, forgiving it the way that it is, for what I've made up, is what I'm saying. What I've made up about me from my life experiences, because we all make up stories about ourselves from what happens in our world, from our earliest memories to this moment. And essentially, all forgiveness is self forgiveness. As I forgive myself, I can find it in my heart to forgive the world for the way that I see the world, and begin to heal the way I see happens in here, because what I see is a reflection of an internal state. If that's not too esoteric, what I see outwardly is a reflection of my internal state of mind. So if I'm bitter and angry in my life, I'm going to project that or see that in the world everywhere I look. I'm going to pick up on it. I'm going to focus on it, and we can begin to shift that by shifting how we see. And forgiveness is the key to unlocking the door to our awareness and to peace of mind.
I love that aspect that it is the inner interpretation of what we are experiencing outside of ourselves.
Yeah. It's so subtle. It's so automatic that we're often not aware that we're continually creating a story about how the world is, about how I am in the world, about how you are. We all have an ego, and then we assign an ego to other people, how we think they are, how we see them, how they behave. There's something about opening your heart, like opening your heart to everything without fear of being hurt or attacked, or like that, to move through the world with an open heart and to see people with an open heart.
Mm.
Grants them the permission just to be who they are, and then that's reflected back to you and I to just simply be who we are, and there's harmony, there's ease, there's grace.
As you said that, I was thinking, I think that's part of why people find forgiveness so difficult, because they're afraid. Oh my goodness, are people really going to know who I am? And do I want them to know who I am? And
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, we get caught too. We get hooked by the things that happen to us, and then the question, can I forgive that? Or the statement, I can't forgive that. And that's understandable, because bad things happen. There's in my work, here's one thing that's true. Everyone, without exception, has had trauma in their lives. It's just the range from the worst kind of trauma to more minor trauma, but everyone's dealing with something, and it becomes a barrier or an obstacle to their full self-expression. And it could be said that the there's a couple quick ways. One is through gratitude, appreciating the life that you have, the people you know, the experiences you've had, everything without exception, even the hard things. Finding something to appreciate about what that made available to you in your life and where it
Mm.
took you. And then forgiveness, forgiving everything. I know it sounds like way sweeping, but to forgive everything to the best of your ability each and every day. And that's why I say it's a state of being, it's a way of being, it's a practice.
Mm.
It's a daily practice.
I love that word, practice. When I work with people in resilience, it's the same thing. It has to become a practice within you, so that you are
Yeah.
going to decide that you're going to move forward. You're going to
Mhm.
decide that you're going to get around the blocks, not let them sit on you and prevent you from moving forward.
Yeah,
So same thing with forgiveness. I love that, the idea that each day you make that decision.
it is. And yeah, the practice piece is absolutely essential. No matter, like in your work and my work, no matter how much we have to offer people, to whatever extent they're willing to come to sit and be and have deep conversation, the rest of the time, like the other 23 hours or 22 hours out of a day, they have to be, we have to participate in our own rescue. We have to engage a daily
Mm.
practice that keeps the energy moving forward, keeps our energy moving.
Mm.
And that's, as you know, that's the essence of a practice.
I want to shift it slightly, but not too far.
Hmm.
I'm thinking here, I can recall moments in my own life. When, for example, I was ignored in meetings. Maybe I was the only woman there. I mean, I can remember those days. And
Yeah.
you really had to fight to make yourself be at least be listened to. I mean, I used to run a big division, and people used to diss the division, and it was, why did they do that? It was all I could do to keep calm, and present a calm countenance. Because after all, in business, you're supposed to be calm and rational all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
especially, you couldn't be seen as an emotional woman. Uh,
Yeah.
so I guess the question is forgiveness useful in business? And if so, how, from your perspective?
Well, it absolutely is. And just to your point, the experience you had as a woman in business, business typically dominated by the masculine or the patriarchy, if you like, um, and the extent to which, speaking on behalf of women, how masculine you have to, how much you have to like bring up your masculine energy to engage, to compete, to be in the same room. But in a practical sense too, for all of us who have been in business or who've been an employee in a business, things happen. There's loss of business. There's businesses that go belly up. There's, you didn't get the loan, you didn't get the raise, you didn't get the job. And to be able to forgive that, to let it go, to just let it be what it is, which is to say, letting the past go, whether immediate or going back years, so that you can move forward. So you have the freedom to be forward looking and to see to be present to what's next, what's coming down the pike,
Yeah.
what's available, and what opportunities are available to me today. What did I learn from that? So it's to say, to take the lesson and leave the burden, not pile it on, and to to free ourselves, to be able to think clearly, to be well connected internally, and also, I say
Mhm.
vertically. I want to speak to that for a moment.
Sure.
There's a notion of in my world that when we are vertically aligned, when we are aligned in the vertical plane, which is to say with spirit, with the spirit that lives within us, grounded to the earth, grounded to this environment that we live in, when we're vertically aligned, it stabilizes the horizontal plane, which is to say
Ah,
the place of our daily lives, the middle
yeah,
world.
yeah.
When we are stable and clear and connected, the
Mhm.
horizontal plane in which we operate is more stable. We don't have to look very far to see where there's instability, chaos, all kinds of mayhem with people that are not connected. They're not vertically aligned. They haven't taken the time, my guess. It goes back to practice to deepen and strengthen their connection to God, source, creative intelligence, however you describe that,
Mhm.
guides your life, to establish a relationship with it, to cultivate that relationship every single day and not deviate.
And even for those who choose not to recognize uh, a higher power, I'll call it,
Mhm.
there's there is within them a set of values. And I think
Yes.
what you're talking about is certainly relevant to them as well. Because if they don't reinforce and remind themselves of what their values are, they can easily be pushed off
Yeah.
balance. And I love that vertical image that holds it for the horizontal.
Yeah. I think of it like a rod, a stake,
Mhm.
um, a stabilizing force that goes through me, that helps me to think about just the mechanics of being upright in a
Yeah,
field of gravity in the world, the coordination that has to happen.
yeah.
Well, similarly, there's a coordination that has to happen to keep ourselves upright in our thinking, in our mindset, in our spirit as we move through the world, in much the same way as we would physically to be coordinated and balanced. Yeah.
Hmm. And I'm thinking about it again for my question around about business.
Hmm.
As you're talking, I'm thinking even a business needs to have, in a way, that vertical. You need to know what your mission is.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the big thing. And yet it has to be rooted in practices that will support the achievement of that. So there is a whole vertical sense in an organization that then supports the delivery.
Exactly.
This is a new image for me. Thank you, Tom. I've never seen it that way.
Yeah, and just you saying that, the business needs to be aligned, vertically aligned. It needs to be in alignment with his values, alignment with the people who support and serve the business. We see too often, businesses that the the CEOs or the leadership team go off one way and leave the workers, the supporters, etc., kind of in the dust. Well, there's not alignment. They're out of alignment. Alignment's really, really key.
And, it's one of the reasons probably that mergers and acquisitions have such trauma in
Yeah,
that process because you're suddenly trying to mesh two things that may have very different vertical alignments. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, I also want to think about this from the perspective of the psychology of it all. And I know that that's part of your practice as well. You and I both grew up in a spiritual tradition that spoke of forgiveness as being important for a better life. But the forgiveness from the spiritual side and from the psychological side is important as well. I mean, if you can't let go of something, as you say, it weighs on you, uh, and it also can create fear in you, anxiety, as we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
Are there other things that you see in the people that you work with?
Well, fear and anxiety for sure. The we speak in terms of distinctions between the psyche and spirit and body, but if we can bring them closer together and see them less separate. So the body, one way to see the body is as neutral. We use phrases like the body has a mind of its own, but it's if you say it is neutral and it serves the dictates of the mind. And if it's ego driven, the body's going to behave in a certain way that's distinct from if it's more spirit driven, if that makes sense. Um, the great challenge is to bring the ego in service to the spirit within us instead of allowing the ego to run amok the way egos tend to do. And egos can be unforgiving, judgmental, um, condemning, self condemning. Uh, I've I've heard it said that the ego can be suspicious at best and vicious at worst.
Mm.
The evidence of that all around us, and our great task is to bring the ego under or into service to humanity, into service to the higher good, into the service to the spirit within us. And one of the greatest ways to do that is through forgiveness. Again, forgiving ourselves for what we've made up about ourselves, about each other, about the way the world is, forgiving that so we can see clearly, so we can see through clear eyes the deeper reality of what's present, the love, the connection, the beauty of humanity, the beauty in each other. And it's a very intimate thing. Like when I am with people, whether it's a store clerk or someone across the counter or a neighbor, to just be with them for a moment while I'm with them, to for a moment to look directly into their eyes,
Mm.
not staring them down, but it's eye to eye, like left eye to left eye. It happens all the time. I would invite your listeners to try it when you're with someone, just for a moment, look directly into their left eye and see what you see there. There's a moment of recognition. There's a moment of connection that they know
Mm.
that you know that they've been seen and that you saw them. And it creates an intimacy, it creates an ease, it kind of uh, breaks down some of the barriers that naturally exist between us. And we can do that on a daily basis everywhere we go with people and have a little fun while we're at it too, in that connection, not being so serious and formal, like that.
You know what I love about this example is that there are no conditions for this other than the fact that the person has to have an eye that you're looking at,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's really great because then
Mhm.
there's no judgment that goes on, there's no assessment, you
Mhm.
just make the connection, and I'll tell you, it reminds me of uh, some of the comments made by one of my other guests, uh, Michelle Borba. She talks about empathy and that empathy is such an important thing for children to learn because she
Uh,
works mostly with children, and by children I mean like from 1 to 18, so it's that whole formative time in their lives, and she talks about the fact that if you can help them become more empathetic, all kinds of things open up for them, including your point about appreciating the world simply
mhm.
from that. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. As a practice, appreciating the world, appreciating everything. It's part of my prayer every morning is to appreciate all that I have, all that I am, all that I'm becoming.
Ah,
Part of my ceremony when I open a ceremony at the fire, acknowledging that, and I call my work Reclaim the Sacred. And it's literally that, to reclaim what's sacred. We give everything all the meaning that it has for us. So
yes.
we want to give everything all the meaning that we can give it. And something is sacred. For me, something is sacred because I say so, because I say it's sacred.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about relationships with others, first with ourselves, recognizing that who I am, who you are, is a sacred being. And I want to be in relationship with what is sacred within me. And to the extent that I'm able to do that, part of the practice is to forgive myself for everything I've made up about myself that's not true. And to the extent that I can do that with myself, then I have the capacity to extend that same courtesy to other people,
Yeah.
no matter what they've done, no matter how they show up, no matter what their political orientation is, their sexual orientation, their religious orientation. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
Doesn't matter. They're human. They're my brother or they're my sister. And to see past all those obstacles, all those facades, to get to see to the heart of who people really are,
Yeah.
even
You
if they don't see that for themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
Be able to see that because I've spent time, or you've spent time, appreciating who you are, despite all your foibles and bad behavior and all that stuff.
Hmm. Well, your mistakes,
Yeah,
silly things. Yeah.
everything.
I love the word sacred. I once did a talk on that because people tend to think of it as being holy, something very special, when in fact, sacred really means set apart. So
Mm-hmm.
we can set apart all, everything that anything, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes sacred because we have set it apart. And that
Mm-hmm.
your comment about just addressing the person across the counter by connecting with them by your eye to eye, that is a setting apart so that it is set apart from all the rest of the universe in a way because that at
Yeah,
that moment, so it's a sacred moment. I like this.
yeah. I love what you're saying. So, on that same note, when I'm creating a ceremonial space, I'm opening the space. I I tell the folks that I'm sitting with, I call it laying down the circle. So we're talking about ceremony now, and I think that we are truly lacking in ceremony in our lives, in
Oh yes.
ritual.
Yeah.
that enriches us, that is nourishing to us, that each of us can claim for ourselves. So I have a ceremony, and I lay down the circle, and what I say before I do that is I'm delineating what's outside from what's inside. We're creating sacred space together within this space. But in my mind, in my awareness, I know that everything is sacred. But I'm creating an artificial distinction for what's going to happen here around the fire inside this circle is distinct from the everyday world out there. So it's to set apart and that everything is sacred. Like it's both and, you know.
And anything can be sacred.
Yeah.
It gets, oh gosh. I
By
want
the
you to,
power of our word, by
correct.
the power of our intention, by
Yeah.
the heartfelt, authentic,
Mm,
meaningful intention to have something be sacred for us in relationship. Well, it's all about relationship
mm.
with everything, with especially with people, with each other, but with our environment also, you know, every aspect of our environment.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you now because in our lives, there are things that are egregious.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one word. Another word, some people would say it's evil. It's destructive.
Yeah.
It's death delivering. I mean, all
Mhm.
those things. How do we bring ourselves to forgive that? Because we see it everywhere. Well, no, I take that back. We see it often. I'll leave it like that.
Yeah. I think the first thing is to have the ability, the capacity to take a step back from it. It's akin to being on the battlefield when you're in the trenches and it's blood and gore and destruction and mayhem all around us, to have the capacity to rise above the battlefield or to take a step out and a step back so we can get a perspective. When we're enmeshed in what we're identifying as heinous or evil or destructive, it's very hard to have. Here's where it's good to separate, like creating sacred space for ourselves from which we can think of it as clearing a small place in which to stand. So you have a place to stand as you're observing the chaos in the world. I want to share a concept with you that I just recently came across, and it is that in this is from a chemist's perspective. In systems where there's an enormous amount of chaos, there are there develop small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos.
Ah,
Small islands of coherence are created in a sea of chaos. So where does a small island of coherence live for us? It's here. We have to create for ourselves an integrated, coherent way of being in union, connection with that which is within us, as well as that is with that is what as well as that which is between us, to create union and relationship, integrated, coherent, right where we are. How do we do that? Not when we're all scattered in a million directions mentally, which happens just in the course of business and life,
yep.
but by carving out sanctuary for ourselves, a state of being in which there's healing and grounding and coherence.
I love that metaphor. Oh my goodness, that is just dynamite.
Yeah.
Islands of coherence. It reminds me
Google
of
it. You
the,
can Google it
oh yeah,
and
okay,
find out, see the whole quote and what it means to have these small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos.
great.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who talked about flow. When we can get that, just that moment, that time when almost the rest of the world is disappeared in a way, and we are just doing, are totally focused on something that we produce the most creative things, the
Yeah.
most difficult things. And as you're describing this, I'm thinking to myself, you are creating an island of coherence when you're in the flow.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
So when I make a fire, fire ceremony is part of my practice.
Mm.
I go out in the land, my circle's there, the fire pit's in the middle, and there's a ritual of putting things out. I have antlers and herbs and sweetgrass and sage and tobacco and all these things. And as I'm laying these things out, I'm creating, it's meditative, it's calming. I'm creating a coherent field for myself and for whoever enters into that field. So I had a client last night, and I said, as we were looking around, I said, I've been out here, I've spent hours out here already gathering wood, splitting wood, making the fire, raking, preparing the space energetically for you to come here to do the work that you need to do, that I'm helping you to facilitate without getting in the way. So we do this first for ourselves, and we do it for others when we do it for ourselves, so that others, when we invite others into our spaces, our homes, our offices, wherever we conduct business, we are a coherent field. We are generating safe space. We cannot generate safe space when we're holding grievances, when we're upset chronically, when we're bitter and angry, when we're enraged about what's happening in the world. However enraging it might, what might we might be entitled to be, it doesn't help. It only adds to the noise and the chaos. So we have
Mm.
to calm ourselves, active calm, like you were saying earlier. And we can only do that with a practice, with a daily practice of quieting the mind, connecting with our internal guidance, and then going out into the world, then
And
into the fray,
and carrying that with you.
carrying that with you. We're essentially unburdening ourselves in the moments of our quietude, in the moments when we're in sanctuary. When I say to folks, when you're upset, you're bereft, you don't know what to do, make a circle and put a fire in it. It's metaphorical and it's literal, so that we can create a coherent state of being in which forgiveness is key, so that we can operate from a peaceful place.
Yeah.
It's
You,
absolutely essential.
as you're talking, I have these visions in my mind of parents preparing the dinner, and then the family gathering around, and in a way you're preparing a sacred space for your family. Just
Exactly.
it's great. And I'm now thinking about leaders who want to say have a really rich discussion among their team because they're tussling with a really challenging problem.
Mhm.
It's yes, it is important to have that discussion, but from what I'm hearing you say is they need to also be thinking about themselves, and have they prepared themselves for that conversation?
Yeah.
uh, do they have the questions they want to pose, not argumentative questions but stimulating questions and opening questions?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. The coordinating the mind to work in a good way, and then there's the energy that we're. It originates with an intention. The energy, an intention to
Yeah.
create sanctuary, to create sacred space, to create safe harbor, a haven,
Mm.
a an enriched field for a conversation to take place amongst your team in a leadership or business format. Uh, we're essentially leading from the spirit,
Yeah.
and this is the essence of spiritual leadership.
Mm.
It's following the lead of spirit and then helping others to follow the lead of their spirit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we presence it. We It's not like we proselytize it. We be it. We have
We
to
be it.
embody it and every cell of our body in every way we can, and that takes some time.
Yes.
It takes intention. It
Yeah.
takes attention.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my sanctuary here. The books that I read that are stimulating, inspiring, they're spiritual, and then journaling and making notes, and then communicating from that space, going to that place, and from that place, then communicating.
Yeah.
And again, when going back to the topic of forgiveness, unforgiveness, just unforgiveness. It doesn't matter what happened, who did what to who, what's going on in the world. To have an unforgiveness in our field blocks the flow.
Yeah.
That's it. It just creates an obstacle to the flow of, well, here's the thing. You and I and your listeners, we want to be a clear vessel in the world for ourselves, for our families, in our businesses. We want to be a clear vessel so that we're a conduit for information, inspiration, clear thinking, creative thought, to infuse our businesses and our lives with life,
Yeah.
enriching our lives. So we want to be a clear vessel.
Yeah.
To harbor unforgiving thoughts, harsh judgments about ourselves and then about the world only is an impediment to that. So we
I,
have a vested interest.
I want to add one other piece to this. There are a lot of people who feel that the way in which you resolve everything is revenge.
Mhm.
I wondered if you would speak to that particular aspect of unforgiveness.
Well, you've heard the old adage, take you take the poison and expecting it's going to hurt somebody else, and that's the essence of revenge. You know that what comes through us, what moves through us, has an effect on us. There is no other way. So if we're vengeful, um, well, it speaks so loudly of our own woundedness
Yeah.
that we're attempting to exact justice or exact some kind of retribution from someone else in return, but it's a lose-lose. I lose and you
Yeah.
lose,
Yeah.
and to see that for what it is, and it's like in kind of its horror, it's like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to get my needs met that way, you know,
Oh,
and then we call it justice in the world. We call that, well, that's justice,
mm,
but that's the world,
yeah.
the world that we live in. And there's a deeper, I call it a deeper reality. There's another world where revenge has no place.
Mm,
Judgment is not, it's not ours to have and to hold, to relinquish that.
yeah. To let go.
To let
Well,
go and allow, like we were saying
yeah,
earlier,
to allow.
to allow life to move through us unobstructed, and to
Yeah.
not burden our bodies with thoughts and conditions and memories that it is not meant to hold on to. And that's the work, to release the memories of the things that have happened to us in our lives.
Yeah. I unfortunately we're running to the end of our time, but
Oh,
I did want to say one other thing, and that is your discussion of, you didn't really discuss it, but you mentioned that you journal. And I was thinking about the people who may be reluctant or out of habit of having that moment in the morning, which often we would call prayer.
mhm.
That's not for me. But a journal is a great way for people to do those kinds of things and not have any connotations that would be uncomfortable to them. Just
Yeah,
use that time to speak to yourself through writing. Yeah.
right. That's exactly it. To speak to yourself through writing, to clear your mind in a conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
And what I discover for myself is I'm actually connecting with my higher mind,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part of me that has clarity, that can see, that has a far-reaching vision for
Mhm.
my life. and I can consult with that. I can express my gratitude in that way. I can make a list of the people that I have a grievance with or where I need to forgive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Tom Garcia, thank you so much for this amazing conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. I'm going to talk about something that nobody wants to talk about, yet it is at the heart of healing our lives. As I began the show by talking about Dan Jones' active calm, he said, you remember, allowing instead of trying, allowing the mind to be quiet, allowing the body to relax. In discussion after the show, he agreed that letting go of control, letting the body do its thing, allowed the body to do what was necessary to prepare and maintain active calm. In this Grounds for Thought, I'm going to try to connect with Dan Jones, what he said about allowing and what we need to do by letting go. I lived through a reorganization, a moment in the reorganization's history that everyone wanted to forget even before it was over. The purpose was to reduce staff by 10%, and it did it in the most egregious manner anyone could imagine. I won't describe it except to say that firing people was not a normal practice in the organization up to that point. If I did it, it was excruciating. And I can say that because I actually did fire someone on my staff and suffered as a manager as much as the staff member who was fired. And the suffering was from how the organization, now HR in particular, treated me as if, how did I dare to fire someone where that was never done? As if I was making the organization look bad because I felt it more important to remove the incompetent staff member rather than let the other staff feel a sense of injustice of having to constantly cover for that person. But that's another story. What I want to tell today is the story of survival guilt that pervaded the organization after the mass firings. Those who remained in the organization felt a deep sense of guilt that for some reason they had made it through when their colleagues did not. The intense feelings of guilt were the same as those experienced by survivors of natural disasters, accidents, and even war. All they talked about was how bad the reorganization was, and no one talked about the guilt they were feeling, the feeling of being responsible somehow, even though they had no control. Survivors of terrible accidents often feel they should have died instead, and are undeserving of being still alive or in the job, as in this case. There is often a sense of shame and blaming themselves, again for something they had no control over. Psychological symptoms include irritability, lack of motivation, mood swings, obsessive thoughts about the event. And if you're wondering about the impacts on the organization, productivity dropped 30% that first year after the reorganization. Other symptoms, such as mood swings, anger, and suicide, tended to be hidden, yet I'm certain they existed. This is one of the most challenging lessons in forgiveness, because the forgiveness is about forgiving yourself, just as Tom talked about. When one of the symptoms of survival guilt is feelings of helplessness, it is no wonder that it feels impossible to do. Yet, if we think of it as letting go, then the feelings of helplessness work in our favor. There is no action to letting go. It is a matter of deciding to do so. But that decision has to be informed. Recognizing that you are not the cause of the decision is important. Managers can play a major role in this. I took 3 days of time, 24 hours in total, to talk to every staff member in my division individually to tell them why decisions had been made and why they were not to blame. I made sure those next in line were all informed of the likely implications so they could observe their immediate staff more specifically and step in or call for help quickly. Overall, helping people understand their real role in the decisions was essential. Offering to discuss any concerns that come up in future is also important to reduce feelings of guilt. If you find yourself with a less willing manager, then you must take the job on yourself to identify what has made you angry or sad or uninspired and put it into its proper place and forgive yourself. In the end, forgiveness is like resilience. It is a decision, even if it means making the decision again and again until you feel the release within yourself. Master Eckhart Tolle said it so well in his book, The Power of Now. He said, "Forgiveness is to relinquish your grievance and so to let go of grief. It happens naturally once you realize that your grievance serves no purpose except to strengthen a false sense of self. Forgiveness is to offer no resistance to life, to allow life to live through you." I think this is one of the hardest grounds for thought I have ever written. We don't like to talk about forgiveness because we don't like to do it. It's hard and painful. But if you can do it enough, it becomes a practice, just as Tom talked about, that allows life to live through you. What a beautiful way of saying it. Allows life to live through you. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. If you have a question you'd like to explore with me, go to my website, madelynblair.com, and schedule a free consultation. I often ask you for ideas, questions you would like to have answered, or topics you'd like to hear about on the show. If you aren't already on my mailing list, please stop by my website and register for it on the contact page. I want to hear what's on your mind. If you are on YouTube, click the like button, please, and subscribe. It helps me, but it also helps others who are looking for this kind of information. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.